Well, hello there. My name is HW, and thank you so much for listening to the Tone Junkie Podcast. This is a special episode, episode 40. And I'm super excited to have the one, the only, it's Stu G on the podcast, everybody. You've been seeing that we're working with Stu on Instagram, on Facebook, everywhere. And what's up, Stu?
Yeah, it's good to be with you, HW.
Yeah.
I'm honored.
Well, I am honored. Obviously, we've had a lot of days in the studio and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I know a ton about your sound and your rig now, but not all the videos have dropped, or they're dropping right now. At the time we're recording this, they haven't dropped yet. But what's new? Well, tell us what's new in the world of Stu G. But actually, before you do that, let me just say today's podcast is sponsored by. Because we're official now. We have sponsors now on the Tone Junkie Podcast.
I'm impressed.
Well, I'll be impressed when they're paying sponsors. But no, it's sponsored by the Tone Junkie Loaded Kemper, available exclusively at British Audio. And rumor has it we're going to go down to British Audio, I think, and check out some Kempers pretty soon.
I think we are, yeah.
And that'll be fun. What's new in the world of Stu G? What are you working on?
So, coming into 2019... the things that I'm excited about are I'm continuing to play live with Michael W. Smith. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I've got the Kemper Profiles coming out. I'm very excited about that.
Me too.
And continuing with the Beatitudes project. That's really that's my biggest passion right now.
Yeah.
Just seeing that come to completion with the release of the film, and we don't know exactly how that's going to happen just yet, but
sure.
We would love it if it was on Netflix or if it was on something like that, Amazon Prime or something, but we're just kind of waiting on some conversations there, and that would be amazing, because then I can release the curriculum that I've written and all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm excited about that, and but always, especially at the beginning of the year, I'm always excited about gear for some reason.
Right.
So I'm kind of having a little sort through all my stuff right now at home, and because I'd really like to, even just the conversation about going down to British Audio and getting a Kemper or whatever, I've got to raise some money for that. So so I'm just thinking about, what to sell. I'm just excited about gear most of the time, but particularly right now.
Well, there's always a lot of big gear announcements at the beginning of the year with NAMM and stuff. Yeah. And we were just talking about, neither of us went to NAMM, but there's so many cool products that came out. I was showing you that the new Marshall head. Yeah. And you were checking out the Fender Acoustasonic, the new one. Yeah. What'd you think?
Honestly, it was fun to play for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think...
Would you use one? You're a guy.
I don't think I would, honestly. Yeah. I don't think I would. I don't think it looks amazing.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
It looks so awkward. I still can't tell if I love it or hate it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's ugly, but also there's something appealing about it. I don't know.
I mean, the ability to flip between the acoustic and the electric stuff. I mean, that concept's been around for years and years.
Right.
But
it never quite catches on.
No, like some people, I remember the Godin stuff coming out and that being really popular with some people, and it's horses for courses, isn't it? Like I think about this with gear a lot, is that if you like it, that's all. Like, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks,
right?
So because at the end of the day, it's all about if you feel comfortable and happy. If you're feeling great about yourself,
you play better.
Yeah. So I'm easily led. I get very distracted by people saying this is amazing. This
we
this
all are
bit of gear, and what have you. But at the end of the day, I think that that it's just about what you think sounds great or feels great. What makes you feel great in that moment when you're either in the studio or on the stage.
Right. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite piece of gear right now?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, how about this?
Yeah.
All-time favorite piece of gear, like the piece of gear you can't live without. I think I know what that is.
Yeah, it's my Park.
It's your Park. I know. It's the Park.
My Park amplifier. I like that. I think that will always be my favorite. And I think, that is an idiosyncratic thing.
Right,
some people might hear that and think, it's okay.
Yeah.
But for me, the first time I heard that, The way I would explain what it does to me is that it's not generic.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of amps are amazing amps, and I've got a few. You know, but
you've got a couple nice ones. I mean, the Stu G Collection that we're working on has a lot of nice amps.
That's right.
Think.
That's right.
The Park is definitely in there.
But yes, there's something about it that stands out, and it's to do with the sort of the non-generic nature of it. Yeah, like when I turn an amp on, you know, there's something that goes from here to here with the good
it just
amps.
gets bigger.
Yeah, it's kind of bigger. More. You probably can't explain it in technical language.
Right.
Yeah,
you just like what it does.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, in case people are watching this and haven't heard, you know, we're doing the Stu G Collection. It's a collection of IRs, Kemper Profiles, Helix patches, and you know, I don't know, whatever I find in your garage, and we can turn into a product, right? Maybe like Valentine's Day cards.
Yeah, I thought I heard.
We could do some Stu G Valentine's Day cards.
I thought I heard someone moving around in there last night. Now I know who it was.
No. But obviously, the Park was the first thing that you and I got together on Profile, because that's your main amp, and probably that's the amp that spans almost all the projects, all the everything. It kind of makes an appearance, even if it wasn't here or there.
That's right. So if we're talking about going back over the Delirious stuff, it wasn't around for the Cutting Edge album, for King of Fools, or for Mesomorphis. It was it appeared at the end of Mesomorphis, but didn't make the album. So because we'd already finished.
Yeah, where'd you get it? I don't know if I've asked you this story.
No, Chandler Guitars in Q. So
is that where the James Bond lady's from? Q, right?
Q is KEW, and it's near Richmond in West London. And there was two brothers, Doug and Charlie Chandler, and they had a store called Chandler Guitars, and so I don't know if they're watching this, but Charlie, hey, because he's got his own place now. Charlie's probably one of the finest builders and repairers in the UK. Yeah, and so it was Charlie's amp. And he was using it in, doing pub things, and it was just too loud.
Right.
And so he wanted to sell it, and word on the street has it that he's regretted it ever since he sold it. And I know that from Daniel at the gig rig, and from another friend. So,
well, it's a great amp, and you don't see a lot of those Parks floating around. The vintage Parks you really don't see a ton of. Maybe it's different in the UK. Maybe there's more floating around, but certainly because of there wasn't a ton of them made. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few around. If you check out a website of a store called the Music Locker in the UK, you see them on there every now and then. But yeah, you know, I believe the history goes that Jim Marshall, his distribution was taken over by a company called Rose Morris. Incidentally, my very first electric guitar was a Rose Morris guitar. Yeah, it was a copy of a Gibson Melody Maker. So Rose Morris took over the distribution, and I think they kind of narrowed down what they would like make and sell, and so I think that, you know, as any sort of creative person that feels boxed in, you've got to break out, and so Jim Marshall decided to still make amps. He changed the circuit a little bit and wanted to make a 50-watt combo and whatever else, and so he put his wife's maiden last name on it.
Right.
Yeah,
which is very cool because his name's Marshall Park. Yeah.
And I believe that that he sold them through a shop in Birmingham at first, in the UK.
Yeah.
And but yeah, you know, so in the 90s, I think that Marshall released like a more of a budget thing called Park. So you don't want those.
Right.
So you want to either get the original, or someone bought the Park brand, I think, and then made some other product, including a really cool fuzz pedal.
Oh, really?
Which I don't have.
Yeah.
But the Blue Park fuzz pedal is very cool. But
why don't you have that? You're a big fuzz guy. You've got a lot of fuzzes.
I do have a lot of fuzzes,
Yeah.
and I'm having a little bit of a clear out of fuzzes at the minute. So because I find myself going back to what what I discovered at the beginning, which is the tone bend. I've got a color sound tone bender, and
an original one.
No, it's a. I bought it in the 90s or
Sure. Okay, yeah.
80s or something. But it's that has a deep and wide sound.
Yeah.
It's not very focused, but what I found with that was even in pop music, you can double track a fuzz note thing and get that sort of get a huge bed underneath a chorus or something. Yeah, it's really cool.
So that's something I watched you do because I was the fly on the wall when you were putting down some tracks for a buddy. You were really quickly sort of doing some guitar tracks for a demo, and I don't know if you remember you were doing that. At the Sousa's place.
Oh yeah.
The Sousa's office.
Yeah.
But you were that was one of the things you did. You had put down several layers, and then you went back and you double tracked with the fuzz.
Yeah.
I think you did a couple things. You said, "Here's this pedal or that pedal," and then you went back and did it. And that track had some, kind of funny guitar parts going on.
Yeah.
But fuzz is something I don't always see used on maybe on the Sunday morning crowd. Maybe it's underutilized a bit.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I get it. I get why.
Yeah,
because
but you keep one on your board.
I do all the time. I think when you step on a fuzz and it kind of goes, it probably doesn't feel like it's a faceless guitar player in a Sunday morning band. But
which is the goal.
We have to be humble, don't we? So humility and lead guitar playing doesn't really fit, does it? We should maybe that should be like a tagline: Fuzz, the least humble of all guitar effects. Maybe that's like the next pedal I do with JHS.
Right. Yeah, the Humble Pie. Humble Pie could be a Big Muff clone. You call it the Humble Pie PI, right?
There you go.
You can have that for free. Humble Pie.
Yeah, that's really good. So Fuzz is I think it's underexplored. Because even if you kind of clean it up a little bit and it starts to sort of cut out, that's still a useful sound.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So my going back to my favorite sort of fuzz sounds, so the color sound, and then honestly, I had a Big Muff for a while, the Softtek one. But the color sound kind of beat that in the in at the time. And then I just discovered the Zvex stuff. Yeah. And so...
you're a big fan of that stuff.
Yeah, I really love the Woolly Mammoth. So we were...
Sure.
We were working with a producer called Charles Wickie, Chuck's Wickie, and he was from Minneapolis, used to work at Paisley Park as an engineer.
Yeah.
And but he designed the circuit for the Woolly Mammoth. Apparently, so that was we were using that on the record, and it's fantastic pedal. The Octane, which I've never owned, but I use Charles's, and that is all over Glow. So the fuzz is on Investigate and what have you, and the Fuzz Factory. Which I have the Fuzz Probe version of that, which has the copper plate that you can adjust the stab control, and then
you can stutter on the fuzz effect.
It's not a stutter. It's kind of like, I can't explain what it does other than if you play around with certain fuzzes and you hold the you're playing around with the tone control and you can make it kind of act like a theremin.
Sure. You can do that.
It kind of does that a little bit. Yeah. It's sort of changing the sort of nature of it.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I think there's probably Fuzz is probably something that's maybe on a Sunday morning for the Sunday morning guys using stuff. It's probably very useful for lead stuff.
Yeah.
Still, and making textures in the guitar. But,
Yeah.
in a world of like transparent overdrives, right? It sort of hits on that humble. You said a term that, let's talk about this, faceless guitar player, right?
Yeah.
Because you're one of the guys running around who is not really faceless with their sound, right? We've talked about this a little bit. There's there's sort of like, maybe some producers like a very generic sound, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what's that like? I mean, because you've seen CCM and worship music and pop music and everything change big time, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what's big, what's popular. But yet you've got a sound all your own, you know what I mean?
Right.
A more aggressive, a little more rockin'.
It is a little more aggressive, yeah. Firstly, I need to track back a little bit. I don't mean to be cynical when I say the
right,
guitar player,
sure.
Because that whole like being a worship leader, which you all are if you're in the band.
Yep.
It is about serving.
Yeah,
the people.
of course.
So so I'm kind of like joking about that a little bit.
But Jesus would have played a fuzz.
Right. Yeah, he would have done. Yeah.
He really would.
Yeah. On his oud.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure that's what's scared the demons away from Saul when David picked up his harp.
a big original Big Muff Pie pedal.
That's right.
Yeah. Your sound.
I don't know. It's what I found when I moved to Nashville was that so at the time we're fresh off the career with Delirious and everything that did in terms of inspire people, which I still get to this day. People come up and saying thank you for what you guys did. And it inspired me to play music or whatever that is.
I mean, definitely what you did in Delirious informed and still informs, I think, the sound of Christian guitar today.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean, and I hope that's a good thing. But it's very honouring to me when people come up and say that. So with that in mind, when I came to Nashville, sort of like, 15 years on or 20 years on from Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble or History Maker, right? So people were asking me, producers were excited that I was around and in town, and we want that Stu G sound on this record, right? Now, when I went and did it, and this isn't derogatory in any way, but a lot of people were surprised with how in your face it was, and that it wasn't kind of like. So I did have some things said, a couple of times, like, but when we turn you down, we can still hear you, or it has too much voice, stuff like that.
Well, I mean. And what we look for that as guitar players, right?
Right.
You want to find your spot in the mix. You want to cut through, right?
Yeah. It's been a really interesting journey actually, because the same idea that you have on a Sunday of like you're wanting to sort of serve the people and serve the song and kind of get out of the way and lift it up. You want to do that in the studio with a producer, right? I want to be a working guitar player, and so. If that's not what you need, then I need to change some things around to make it what you need.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So over the years, it's really interesting for me that my approach has changed when I immediately go into the studio. Yeah. Anyway.
How has your approach changed in terms of the gear you use?
Or just cleaning it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're playing cleaner than than you would.
As a start, yeah. And in Delirious, I never use reverbs. So all that ambient stuff is all delays.
Nobody uses reverb. And what I mean by that is, I can't tell you how many. So I'm just going to name drop a couple people.
Yeah.
So I've talked to. You use some reverb now.
I do now. Yeah.
But I've even noticed as we've sat down, for the stuff you play with Michael W. Smith, I was surprised that you had one reverb, which is in the Stu G Collection. It'll be on the profiles, but we basically copied a couple of your sounds right out of your H9. Tried to really match them. And the first two that we did were the spring reverb, which was fairly subtle. I mean, it's there, but it was shorter.
Yeah.
But you had this long, very long, like 8-second long decay. You could still hear it after a while, but it was so low
on the
in the
ambient
mix.
one, yeah.
Yeah, on the ambient one. And usually when I think of ambient delay, it's big sky, kind of that sort of thing,
Yeah.
And but then when you were playing around it, you had really healthy amounts of delay.
Yeah.
And it was a delay with darker repeats. It was probably a tape emulation or something.
Yeah.
And it was actually just those repeats, those darker repeats going into that subtle reverb that was more giving the bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I can on my expression pedals, I can bring that breath in if I want to, and I do that sometimes, or I can make the repeats on the delays never ending and go into that oscillating thing, which so I use stuff like that a lot where I'm sort of blending those things together. But so I guess in some ways that's quite subtle, but the actual settings aren't very subtle. But they're just mixed down maybe a little bit.
Well, I guess what I mean is it was long, but fairly long. The delay seemed to actually be doing more for the ambient feel than just the washed out
that's right.
verb sort of thing.
Yeah.
I know from not to name drop, but James Duke is notorious for having that reverby sound that people go after. But he's always talking about his Boss RV5. You know what I mean? Simple delay, simple reverb, just a great sounding sort of thing. I know talking to Michael Britt, he's always telling me, I never use reverb on a track like, with this or that. Maybe they added in post or something.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because to me, it's like, I would think, I feel like you almost... Maybe when you isolate the tracks and multi-tracks or something, it's less wet than you think.
Yeah.
It's
oftentimes it's less gainy than you think too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is that? Is it what cuts out? Is it what cuts through the mix? Are some frequencies getting not quite coming up, and so we're hearing it differently? What makes it do that? I always hypothesize. I really don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
Sure. I know.
I don't know what that is. I just think that I don't know. I might have to edit that bit out. I've kind of stumped a bit.
No, we don't edit here at all. No, it's an interesting thing, I think, because I think it's one of those things, you said you get taken with gear at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, Michael Britt was telling me, and Michael Britt is the profile maker, but, and most people know Michael Britt, but he's been playing in Lone Star for years, and they've had a ton of big songs, Amazed and everything, a ton of big pop success and country pop success. But he had this hypothesis. He said to me, it's really only the Sunday morning guys who can do what they're doing and get their tone so dialed in, so nuanced, and care so much about the pedals and the verb, because before Sunday morning became a popular place to play the guitar, Friday nights were where you played the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Pubs and clubs.
Yeah.
But the environment in a pub at a club is very unforgiving. The sound guy doesn't
subtlety.
care. No subtlety.
Yeah.
It's loud. It's in your face.
Yeah.
People are talking over the music.
Yeah.
They're there just as much for the beer as they are for the music.
Yeah.
And I did that for a little while.
Yeah.
I know you did that.
Yeah. And my ears are still ringing to this day. Yeah.
Right. And then you fast forward and the Sunday morning gig, a song ends and it's silent. And it's a captive audience. And there's a sound guy who cares. And you can do things like run in stereo. And you know what I mean? And there's a whole thing, and it's really only in that environment that we can really focus in on the minutia of these small little subtleties to where, you know, it's actually like, oh, I should play the big sky because I like that algorithm, or no, I like the H9 algorithm better. But in a Friday night, it's just sounds reverby,
no, that's right.
or not at all. Yeah,
that's right. I remember, you know, that the actual delay times didn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't worried about, and there's something to learn from that, I think.
Yeah.
You know, that, how does it feel rather than, you know, and I think that, you know, loud and like we think more is more, you know, so if we want to have the impression of it feeling louder or something, we put more gain on it, or we think that, okay, to get that Brian May tone or that AC/DC tone, we have to have loads of distortion, but you don't. Like if you actually isolate that stuff, it's kind of it's louder. It's louder, but cleaner somehow. You know, and I think that brings the definition.
Yeah.
And I think your ears trick you.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the natural compression in your ears and the way that you hear stereo, whatever, you know, I think that we're tricked all the time. I remember the first time that I used attenuators on guitar amps because we were using vintage ribbon mics, and so literally, like, you know, you couldn't like blow the ribbon up. You know what I mean?
Can't get another one. Yeah.
No. So and I remember listening to my Park in the room, in the amp room, and thinking, oh, that sounds awful, you know. And
darker.
Yeah, and just like lackluster.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't making my ears compress, you know. And the engineer Chuck Zwicky, he said, no, he said, I promise you, like come into the control room. And so we went in there, turned it up, sounded awesome. Yeah, didn't sound any different. Yeah, you know. So so I think our ears trick us a lot when we hear a track and we think, oh, that's got to be, you know, drive on 10 and what have you, and it's not, you know.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's we might be listening to a tone that's more focused than we realize. Yes. It really can lack bottom end, and it can be very strong in the mid range. Yes. And you're hearing a single note. Yeah. You know, chords sound dirtier than a single note. Yeah. You know, and single note sustains when you have a lot of compression, a lot of distortion and stuff. It could sound fairly clean. Yeah. One thing I do a lot, and I notice, I tend to think of like, because I've noticed from, you know, how many guitar players before today's Sunday morning crowd used to be able to go buy multi-tracks and isolate a guitar track? You know, your average fan didn't used to buy Van Halen 1, the record, and then isolate Eddie's tone. You know, now we can do that. And, but that's where we can overly obsess about stuff. But one thing I notice is I feel like I turn up the gain for live use because it feels right to me. And I turn up the delay and the reverb for when it's live. But then later I might realize this is pretty wet. And I even go so far as to my Kemper Performance that I have dialed in for live, I never touch it at home for fear that I'll add in more bass. I'll undo the stuff I want live, you know? And that's where I think a lot of people have a hard time discerning between like bedroom tone, what sounds great to you and the guitar when it's by itself, to then in the mix. You know what I mean? Do you ever run across a pedal or something that you didn't like, but then you like it when you used it live or when you use it on a track? You know, you find where it's useful.
You know, honestly, the Kilt is a great example of that. I mean, I have always liked that, but the original Expandora, you know, was incredibly bright to me, especially the way I run my amps, because I love to run my amps quite bright, not overly harsh, but that's just the thing that I do, and so but what I noticed was that when we were making Mesomorphis and and recording tracks like Heaven or Bliss, stuff like that, that it already had that sort of whatever was below 200 hertz was kind of not there,
right.
or less there, and that was like ready made for the track.
Right.
And so you put that live. And so when we made the kilt with JHS, we put the low cut switch just to emphasize that even more, because sometimes, I love the sound of a 4x12 cab. I love the sound of a closed back cab, but it has a sort of a thud to it that I love feeling. But you don't really want it to be too bottom endy, too subby.
Sure.
So really that just cuts out the subs. And so that's an example of like hearing something that perhaps in the bedroom you wouldn't want. You'd want it to feel fuller, but on stage or even in a mix, you're kind of saving the engineer a job. You know?
Absolutely. I have to say, one of the things I noticed when we first started getting together, when we first got into the studio, the first amp we did for the Stu G Collection was the Park, and you brought a bunch of your guitars, and I don't know that I saw the Gretsch the first time, but you brought your Tele, your Strat, and maybe the Duesenberg and a couple other things.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things I noticed was your tone was bright. And I immediately recognized it as, this is a guy who knows how a guitar sounds in a track. You know what I mean? Because I know the difference from, now you have done an encyclopedia of recorded guitar work in terms of tracks and Delirious and everything. I haven't done anywhere near that much. But I noticed the difference between what I have dialed into work live and what I play at home, and then how an isolated guitar track sounds from multi-track or something, in terms of sometimes the brightness and stuff. And I immediately, just you playing on the bridge, it was very rock and roll being in the room with it, but not overly dirty or anything or bright. And you're a very expressive player. That was one of the things I noticed, because early on, and I'll tell this story, we were in the studio just recently, and we were going to profile what was your Delirious rig on like the last tour. It's the JMP 50, and which is a 73 JMP, and then the Park, which is 76, 74, whatever it is. And we... You turned them both. You said, "Let me get this dialed in." And so we had them outside the booth facing us. I wish you could have seen my face, because you were facing the amps. You turned them so loud, and without hesitating, you just went right into stuff. And it was no pun intended. The sound was glorious. I mean, it really was beautiful, right? Now we were in the studio that's part of the house in the back of the church property connected to the offices. My pastor walked in because he later told me, I didn't realize you had these amps in the studio. He thought they were in the room right outside his office. He thought I had set up in the main like sort of house area, and that I thought no one was in the whole house that day, but we were actually in the studio built in. And he came in, he saw you and just waved at us and left. Knew we were doing something. But it was beautiful. It was really a killer tone. I don't remember why I got into that, but
so
it was loud, and it sounded like, to me, it sounded like the sound I would have expected had I gone to see Delirious in a stadium.
Yes.
I mean, it was monstrously huge.
Yes.
The tone,
Yeah, it was huge. And beautiful, as you say. But
that's great.
And I don't get to hear that often nowadays,
right.
But I think one of the things is that your live thing develops over time when you're in a band, because you go in the studio and your rig doesn't matter in the studio. You might just have your Expandora and a DL4 on the floor, and that's what that particular take is doing, with whatever amp you've got lying around, whether it's Martin's Fender Twin or his Vox AC30 or my Mesa or my Park or whatever it is. Right. And you're just, all you're thinking about is what is the right song, right part for this song, right sound for this song, and you're working with the producer, and it's like, oh, can you just pull the top end back a little bit, or whatever it is, you're sort of dialing those things in, and then you have to translate that live, so it's then when you start to think about, okay, so how do I do this, and so that's what develops your rig, is translating what you've recorded into a live situation,
right?
And not just sound wise, part wise too, because if song like My Soul Sings, for instance, there's not a chord played in that song on the record. It's all single notes, and I don't know. I just wanted to build a single note guitar orchestra type idea, right? And so, but you can't do that live,
right?
So
not one of
you. So how do you kind of make that work? So you play around with the delays a little bit more, and create your part live, but that informs what you have on your pedal board or what your rig sounds, and then next time you go in the studio, you might be using some of that. So over the years, it changes into, it's always fluid, and and one thing is always informing what comes next. So and I think that when you look back to what we did on King of Fools, and the guitar sounds on King of Fools, they're not as bright. They're way fuller. And I was using my 135 ES135, which is a fuller sounding guitar, but it's got those P100s on it that are like humbucking P90s. So they're not quite as bright as the P90, but they kind of are. But they have a similar tone, but they're a little bit fuller at the same time. So, the song King of Fools or the song All the Way, that's not as bright as it ended up on something like Glow or something, but and that's just the joy of the journey. It's just it's a progression and a journey. And one thing I'd say is that some people say in joking or sarcastically, that Delirious were the Christian U2 or whatever, whatever that means. Oh, it's so cheesy, but
some people think U2 is the Christian U2.
Well, that's the truth. But but people kind of say that Delirious ushered in this era of U2 worship or Coldplay worship or whatever stupid phrases people want to use, right? Now, just having a dotted eighth delay on your board does not make it U2 worship, right? I can't even believe I'm talking about this because it's so dumb to me.
But it's stuff people hear. And
but if I challenge anyone to go and see the Edge play guitar and then think that is what it's like on a Sunday morning.
Right.
It is nothing like it. It's kind of and this is a challenge to everyone out there. Every note is thought about. It's intentional. Every part, every sound is intentional.
Right.
It kind of knocks your face off. It's so shrill at times, because of the attitude with which it's playing, and it comes down to that attitude and what are we trying to say with this song, and it's nothing like anyone on a Sunday morning.
I love that. I think you're right. I think you're right, big time. I think that Edge is a genius, and it's been so inspirational. As has for me people like Johnny Greenwood. You're a big Radiohead
hugely
fan.
Informative, and people like Graham Coxon from Blur. Talk about bright guitar. So his inspiration has always been the sort of punk movement, and you put a telly into a JMP and turn it up, that's going to be a bright sound, and it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. My original inspiration was Brian May, and
He made you want to play the guitar, huh?
He totally did make me want to play guitar. Yeah, I was playing drums at the time, as a from when I was 13 years old to when I was 16 or whatever. I had a drum kit at home and loved music, but it was when I got my first job and I walked into a record store called Parrot Records in the UK, in Ipswich. And Queen were my favourite band, and so every week I'd go in with my wages and I'd buy like 3 Queen albums until I'd caught up with their whole back catalogue, because I only had cassette tapes of what mates had recorded for me. Yeah. With the microphones in front of their record player speakers, right? And so got my first job and caught up with Queen's back catalogue. Went in one day, and Queen Live Killers had come out. It was 1978, I think it was, and listened to it on headphones in the store. But as soon as that fast version of We Will Rock You came on, like, I left that place wanting to be Brian May. Yeah. Went home and asked my dad if I could sell the drum kit and buy a guitar.
What did he say?
Yes. And my sister had this old kind of classical, really cheap classical guitar, and I learned to play. The first tune I learned to play was "I'm in Love with My Car" from that album. Yeah. And which is the one in the film Bohemian Rhapsody that they really taken the mickey out of. Yeah, right. Out of Roger Taylor, right?
You still have that guitar?
No, I don't have that guitar or my first electric.
Yeah. What was it?
It was a Rose Morris Avon. It was called, and it was that was the one. A replica of a like a Gibson Melody Maker. The sort of double cutaway, solid body with lipstick pickups on it. Yeah.
First amp, what'd you have?
A little. Actually, this is going to be weird, but there used to be a company called JHS.
Really?
Yes, and it was a JHS 5-watt practice amp. Now, I don't know if that was just a European thing.
Yeah. Because I never heard of that.
Yeah. No, that's true. I don't think they're around anymore, right. But it was a 5-watt practice amp. I think it was solid state, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and I discovered that it was too loud to sort of put it on at full volume, but I discovered that if I put it at full volume and then put my duvet from my bed over the top of it and put it upside down, like so the speaker was facing my bed. Yeah, I sounded like Boston in my head.
Yeah, right. Of course, that's the trick to Boston tone. I think right there. That
and so I'd be there in my bedroom playing More Than a Feeling or whatever.
Well, you probably were getting it loud and hot enough to get enough gain, and
and the speaker was probably rattling against the bed sheets, like creating that sort of overdriven sort of vibe. I don't know. But that was cool. But
first pedal,
my first pedal was a Vox compressor. And this is stupid, but I thought that there was this. I can't remember which Queen song it is now, but at the end of it, there's like this real sort of, the whole mix goes through this kind of tape flange or something, or like a phaser, kind of like that. And I said to myself, that must be a compressor, because it's like compressed.
It like squashed.
Kind of sounds like the words kind of sound like the sound, and so I ended up buying a compressor, and then of course it didn't do anything like that. Right. And but I kept it, and then I had the because the Vox pedals were kind of shaped like that, and you could like put them in a semicircle around you. Right. And so I just, like, one by one, I collected a few of those. Yeah. And I don't have any of them anymore either. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. Where are they? In your parents' basement?
No. No, I don't. I honestly don't know. I mean, I must have sold them at some point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So favorite piece of gear right now the park. This is a hard one because I've seen your guitar collection. Favorite guitar?
I think the one that I wouldn't ever get rid of,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, is my Les Paul Standard. My Cherry Sunburst one. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the best guitar I own. It just has the best memories.
Yeah.
For me, I've got one that you haven't seen yet. Actually, is a gold top. I've got a deluxe Les Paul Deluxe gold top.
Yeah. Mini humbuckers.
Mini humbuckers. Yeah.
Late 70s one.
It's a mid 70s one. So it's got the split. It's got the split body. Like from 74, 76, they were making these.
Norland era,
There was a shortage of wood or something.
Yeah.
And
I think pancake bodies, they call it, right? Something like that.
There you go. Yeah, so it's one of those. And, one of our A&R people in America got that guitar for me. And from Groons, I think.
Yeah.
Years ago, like when we first signed or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the guitar that I had on Mesomorphosis, and like the song Gravity. If you search the video for Gravity on from Mesomorphosis on YouTube, then you see that guitar mounted on a car, on the front of a car, like driving around, which is stupid.
What gets the most use today? Whether with in the studio or with Michael W. Smith. I know what it is with Michael W. Smith.
Yeah. So if I was to come to a session that I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah, guitar wise.
I would have my Strat with me, which is an awesome sounding guitar. I'd have I'd bring my Gretsch Silver Falcon, which has got that big bodied, with the Bixby.
TV Jones, fully hollow, big thing.
Yeah, and I would have either my Duesenberg or my Les Paul. That Duesenberg I've got, like the Star TV player, that is a really awesome guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are really, really popular right now. A lot of people playing those guitars.
That bridge humbucker, it has something that isn't too fat, isn't too thin, it's not too overdriven, it's kind of bright, it's got a lot of nice pick attack to it. Yeah, that's a great guitar.
And it matches the P90 in the neck.
Right. Yeah.
Humbuckery, but not like too dark or boring.
So that's often a go-to for me. And my Blue Telly, I would take that.
Yeah.
So probably those sort of 4 or 5 guitars. I'd take, if I knew that it was a certain thing, I might take my Duo Jet, my old Duo Jet. But I don't really take that out very often because it kind of does that one thing,
Sure.
And then,
but that's a special guitar.
It is a special guitar.
It really the thing it does is you plugged that into the 64 Vox.
Yeah.
And you started playing Day Tripper, and it was like a time machine. It has that tone,
Yeah. When you think that it wasn't that actual guitar and that actual amp, but it was the same guitar and the same amp.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's exactly that sound. And then for the last few years, I've had a Revend RG1. So there's a couple of reasons why I got that. I wanted like a Super Strat type guitar, like a guitar that would like had a proper whammy on it.
Yeah.
That with humbuckers that I could attempt the Dan Huff parts on Michael W. Smith songs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And I. At the same time, I'm actually a big Reeves Gabrels fan.
Okay.
I first discovered him in Tin Machine with David Bowie back in the 80s, and then I went to see when I moved to Nashville. He's from Nashville, or was here anyway, and they played at he used to do a regular spot at something called the Family Wash over in East Nashville. And so I went, used to go and see him there and what have you, and went to see him with The Cure.
Right.
So yeah, really amazing guitar player, like very creative.
Yeah.
And so I saw these Reverends around, and saw that he had a signature one, and I got one. Yeah. There's a couple of honourable mentions in terms of guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah. One is that Casey at Veritas is building some of the best guitars I've ever felt.
Yeah, you have a Jaguar, right?
I do.
Like a
yeah, so
Jaguar-esque.
I have his offset one. So
Right.
he made this for me, and it's got a Jaguar pickup in the bridge and then 2 Strat pickups, and so that comes out on the road with me with Michael as well, and it is. It's not like that big rock sound, but the sort of more ambient and sort of stratish textures.
Sure. Like a Johnny Marr type.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's incredible guitar. And then I've got a Bluesman vintage Jazzmaster type guitar as well, and that also is a beautiful guitar to carry around. So those I tour with those, like the Reverend, the Veritas, and the Bluesman Vintage. They're out on the road with me with Michael a lot because it kind of suits the thing.
Sure. Yeah, it's that thing. Let's talk about the Kemper.
Yeah.
Because you wait before we do that.
Yeah.
Give us a pedal recommendation. Like you've played it good, because I've seen on your board, just since I've known you, I've seen a couple things move around. I see things on and off the pedal. You're constantly moving, trying new stuff.
Yes.
And you've got a collection of pedals and stuff. But I notice you've got some older stuff that maybe isn't the flavor of the week, but maybe it was, and it's still working. Like your Full Drive 2. Yeah. The big part of your sound and what you're using right now. Uh-huh. And they've come out with a million versions of that pedal, and maybe the train has moved on to more transparent, more boutique. Yeah. Even and they were an early boutique kind of company full time. They still make incredible stuff. But give us a recommendation. Yeah. What's a pedal you don't hear enough about that you're into, or that you've liked over the years? Yeah.
So something that is an amazing pedal right now is the Roosevelt Drive, the third power. Pedal. Yeah. And that kind of comes on and off my board depending on what I'm feeling at any given time. But that is probably one of the most versatile overdrives that there is out there right now. So huge fan of that. Yeah. And of course, Delana made my sort of signature amp, which isn't available because the kitchen sink actually covers it. So their new amp, like, go and get that. But it was called the Majestic 40 and was really kind of it's not an exact copy because it didn't work of the Park, but it's taken the knowledge of Delana and amp building and the feel of the Park and created an amp. So props to her for that. But the Full Drive is definitely something that I keep coming back to time and time again. Yeah. Maybe it's because I've just been so used to it over the years. From the opening sort of tones of deeper, and then for the solo just stomping on the boost. And I know it's not really a boost. Yeah. But it just kind of like saturates more or gets louder or whatever. Right. I don't know. Yeah. But I wouldn't ever change that or mod that because it's just a sound that's so familiar to me. And because I run my amp so bright, that it just really works. Right. Yeah. compression is something I got into in the last couple of years of Delirious, or last few years, and I was using the Barber Tone press. The reason I wasn't using like a Dynacomp or something was because I would be changing guitars so much between the Les Paul or like humbuckers and single coils, and back then the difference was just too great. Like there was no blend knobs on compressors, and so so when the Barber Tone press came out, I love having a compressor because I just love. I mean, it was interesting when we were playing around with that. Actually, how much my compressor was compressing to my ears, it's not doing that. It's just kind of holding things kind of together, and having the blend knob on the attack. It doesn't matter whether I'm using a humbucker or a single coil. I just love those things.
Yeah, those blend knobs have become all the rage. They seem to be on all the compressors now, and they really, from a player standpoint, it allows you to feel the guitar, but still get that compressed tone. I noticed, because you use right now you're using the JHS Pulp and Peel.
Yeah, the version 4.
Yeah, version 4. And we were trying to get a similar level of compression using the Kemper compressor. Yeah. And it was interesting, like you were saying, dialing that in, because you're reaching down and making an adjustment depending on the guitar. You know. And one of the things I noticed with your Gretsch, with your Jet and the Vox, it was like the compressor was a really important part of that sound. Yeah. And it is an important part of that vintagey sound that you would expect from a Dynasonic on the bridge of a Gretsch into a old AC30. It's not just the amp compressing, but having a compressor in front that just sort of evens out all the peaks of that. That's where it gives you that really bright, chimey, open thing.
But I still want it to have dynamics when I'm playing. Right. So that's why I feel like I'm only just kind of tickling it a little bit, you know. But anyway, so any notable mentions? I mean, I still think the DL4 is one of the best delays out there.
If U2 is responsible for anything today, and if Delirious informs Christian music, definitely the DL4 is the grandfather to everything we have today, because that really changed it. It feels like for everybody. Yeah, that was the first one where it was like you could cover tape and a deluxe memory man, and you could tap it in, and you could have 2 delays on. That wasn't like a rack unit or really expensive. It's still a classic for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the memory man. I mean, that is such a brilliant delay. I've still got a deluxe that I have in the studio. I would probably have that on my board still if space wasn't an issue.
I had 2 on my board for a while. Yeah. And then I added a Boss DM2. And then at some point I said, this is ridiculous. This literally is an entire board for 3 delay sounds. I know. But they're beautiful.
I had for a while I was touring the world with a high watt tape echo on my board.
It's just a glutton for punishment, right? How many nights a week did it not work?
Yeah, none. It worked every night. I never had anything the only thing you had to watch out was if dip switches got moved around on it. But so I mean, everything I have, I use. So which is why I'm kind of coming this year with a little bit if I'm not using something, then I don't need it.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So,
yeah. It's probably a good. It's very KonMari. You familiar?
No.
KonMari is this Japanese lady on Netflix who has this way of folding your towels, folding your clothes, and it's exploded. My wife watched one episode, and every drawer in my house was redone. And it's all about you making sure you can visually see everything that you have available and anything you're not using, thanking it for its usefulness and letting it go on and be part of someone else's kind of. It's a little bit Eastern, but it's very practical, and it fits, I think, a modern aesthetic that is
beautiful.
Popular. Yeah. Hey, thanks Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the Kemper.